There is a moment that comes up sooner or later, usually without warning. Someone asks for your handle, or they say, "I couldn't find you," or they pause just long enough after you explain that you're not on social media. The pause isn't hostile, it's curious, slightly confused, as if a step in the conversation is missing. You notice it even if you don't comment on it. Not using social media doesn't feel like a decision most of the time. It feels like absence, like something you never picked up or something you quietly put down and didn't replace. There's no announcement, no statement, just a gap where something is expected to be. Life continues normally. You wake up, you go to work, you talk to people, you laugh, you worry, you rest. But there's no version of these moments being arranged for others to see, no image selected, no caption written. No pause to think about how this might look from the outside. Sometimes this feels light, clean, uncomplicated. Other times it feels strange. You realize how often events are followed by documentation: meals, trips, thoughts, moods. You notice how quickly people reach for their phones, not out of excitement exactly, but habit. You watch moments turn outward almost automatically, and you stay where you are. Not outside it, just not performing it. You might feel relief in this, a sense of privacy, a sense that something remains yours because it isn't shared. But alongside that relief, there can also be a faint tension, a question that hovers quietly. Am I missing something? Am I falling out of view? There are practical moments too, invitations passed through stories you never see, jokes you don't quite understand, references to posts, comments, reactions that happened somewhere you don't exist. No one is excluding you on purpose. Still, you notice the gap. And then there's the part you don't always say out loud. Not being seen can feel calming, but it can also feel like choosing silence in a room where everyone else is speaking. You don't dislike people, you don't dislike connection. You just don't want this particular way of being present. You don't want to be looked at without being there. You don't want to narrate yourself. You don't want to turn your life into something consumable. So you don't. Most days it barely registers. It's just how things are. But every so often the absence becomes visible. Not because something is wrong, but because not being seen stands out more than it used to. And in that moment, you feel it again. Not pride, not rebellion, just the quiet weight of opting out, of a world that assumes visibility is the same thing as being alive. From a Jungian view, choosing not to use social media is less about technology and more about boundaries of the inner world. What matters is not the platform itself, but what happens inside when visibility is expected and withheld. There is often a quiet sensitivity at work here. Being seen, even casually, even abstractly, activates something. Not always anxiety in a dramatic sense, but attention, a sense of exposure that doesn't feel proportionate to what's being shared. A photograph, a thought, a small update suddenly feels heavier than it looks, as if it carries more of the self than intended. Jung would notice that the psyche doesn't like being fragmented. Social media invites constant partial appearances, pieces of the self lifted out of context and displayed. For some people, this feels playful. For others, it feels invasive, not because they are secretive, but because their inner life doesn't separate easily into shareable fragments. There can also be a strong protective instinct, not a fear of others, but a wish to keep certain inner states intact. Feelings, thoughts, and moods often need time to settle before they have shape. When everything is immediately visible, that settling never quite happens. Opting out becomes a way of preserving psychological depth. Jung would also point to the role of the persona, the social mask we all wear to move through the world. Social media asks for a persona that is always active, always polished, always slightly performing. For someone who already expends energy navigating daily social rules, adding another layer can feel exhausting rather than expressive. This doesn't mean the person lacks confidence. Often it's the opposite. There is enough inner substance that it doesn't need reinforcement through reaction, metrics, or recognition. Validation from the outside isn't rejected angrily, it's simply not required in the same way. At the same time, Jung would not romanticize this choice. Avoidance can exist alongside clarity. Sometimes not being seen protects unfinished parts of the self. Sometimes it shields uncertainty. Sometimes it simply creates space to breathe without feedback. What matters is that the choice is serving the psyche, not shrinking it. From this lens, not using social media isn't a statement about the world, it's an internal calibration, a way of deciding how much of the inner life is ready to face outward and how much needs to remain unobserved. Jung would leave the question open, not asking whether visibility is good or bad, but whether the inner world feels safer, fuller, and more coherent when it is allowed to exist without an audience. When someone says they don't use social media, the explanation rarely stops there. Almost immediately, a story forms around the choice, not always spoken out loud, but felt. Nietzsche would pay close attention to that story, not to argue with it, but to expose how quickly meaning is assigned. In the current world, visibility has become a quiet moral good. To be seen is to exist properly, to share is to participate, to post is to confirm that one is present, engaged, and keeping pace. Against this background, choosing not to be visible doesn't read as neutral, it reads as deviation. Nietzsche would notice how fast this deviation is interpreted. Not using social media is often framed as withdrawal, avoidance, arrogance, or fear. Sometimes it's softened into eccentricity, sometimes it's treated as suspicion. Rarely is it allowed to remain simply what it is, a refusal without hostility. What's important is that this reaction says more about the value system than about the individual. A culture that measures relevance through attention cannot easily understand someone who declines to be measured that way. So it invents explanations. It fills the gap with meaning. Nietzsche would also point out that social media is not just a tool, but a stage. It trains people to narrate themselves continuously, to translate experience into display, to anticipate reaction before experience is even finished. Over time, this narration starts to feel natural, even necessary. Stepping away from it, then, looks like stepping away from life itself. That's why the person who isn't visible can feel unsettling. Their silence interrupts the shared performance. They refuse the unspoken agreement that life should be legible, accessible, and confirmable. This refusal doesn't attack the system, but it quietly exposes it. Nietzsche would resist the temptation to praise this choice as superior. He wouldn't turn non-participation into a virtue. That would only replace one moral hierarchy with another. Instead, he would ask why constant visibility became compulsory in the first place. Who benefits when people are always presenting themselves? And what kinds of lives become invisible when attention is the currency? There is also resentment hidden in the reaction. When someone opts out, they are no longer playing the comparison game. They are no longer competing for affirmation or recognition. To those still inside the system, this can feel like rejection, even if none was intended. From this lens, choosing not to use social media isn't heroic. It isn't pure, it isn't a statement of superiority. It's simply a refusal to participate in a story that says being seen is the same thing as being real. Nietzsche would leave it there, not with advice, not with praise, but with the discomfort of realizing that many of the values we defend most strongly are the ones we rarely chose consciously. When someone doesn't use social media, the reaction around them often shifts in subtle ways. It's rarely direct confrontation. More often, it's a quiet adjustment in how others relate to them. Fromm and Arendt would both notice this, each from a different angle. Fromm would begin with the need for belonging. Social media has become one of the main ways people signal that they are part of a shared world. Posting, reacting, and being visible are not just habits, they are proofs of connection. When someone opts out, even calmly, it can feel unsettling to those who remain. Not because the person has done something wrong, but because their absence interrupts a system that equates visibility with attachment. Without a profile, others don't know where to place them. There's no steady stream of updates, no reassurance of presence. This can trigger a quiet anxiety. Questions arise that are never fully spoken. Are they okay? Are they pulling away? Do they still belong here? The lack of visibility becomes a gap that people try to fill with interpretation. Arendt would look at the ritual side of this. Social media is full of small, repeated acts that reinforce what normal participation looks like. Liking a post, sharing an announcement, acknowledging events publicly. These actions are rarely discussed as obligations, yet they carry social weight. They are how belonging is performed. When someone doesn't take part in these rituals, the group doesn't need to punish them openly. The pressure works quietly. They may be left out of conversations that assume shared reference points. Invitations may be extended differently. Their absence is noticed, even if no one names it. This is where consequence begins, not as drama, but as drift. Fromm would note that the group often experiences this as loss. Someone has stepped outside the shared rhythm, and the rhythm feels less secure. Arendt would add that systems built on participation tend to distrust those who refuse to perform it. Non-participation can be read as critique, even when it isn't intended as one. The person who doesn't use social media may feel this shift without fully understanding it. Nothing has been said, no rule has been broken, and yet the social field feels slightly altered. This doesn't mean the choice was wrong. It means that visibility has become a condition of belonging, and choosing not to be seen carries effects, whether one wants them or not. Fromm and Arendt wouldn't moralize this, they would simply observe it. When participation becomes ritual, refusal doesn't stay private for long. It changes how the group organizes itself, quietly, almost politely, around the absence of someone who no longer signals their presence in the expected way. Not using social media doesn't resolve into a clear ending. There is no moment where the choice feels complete or justified once and for all. It simply settles into daily life, becoming less of a decision and more of a condition. Most of the time, nothing happens. There is no announcement, no dramatic withdrawal, no sense of having arrived somewhere better. Days pass quietly, messages still come through other ways, conversations still happen. Life continues, just without the steady hum of being observed. What remains is a different relationship to presence. Moments don't need to be prepared for viewing. Thoughts don't need to be shaped for response. There is no pause to consider how something will appear once it leaves you. Experience stays closer to its original form, unfinished and private. This can feel grounding. It can also feel isolating. Both are true at different times, sometimes on the same day. Without constant feedback, there is more space to notice what you actually think rather than what you might say. But there is also less reassurance, less proof that you are visible, remembered, or accounted for. Over time, the reactions of others soften or fade. The questions stop. The absence becomes normal. People adjust their expectations quietly, and you adjust yours. The social world reorganizes itself around the fact that you are present but not on display. Nothing about this needs to be defended. Not using social media doesn't mean rejecting connection, progress, or modern life. It means choosing a narrower channel of presence, a way of being that doesn't rely on constant confirmation, a life that is not continuously translated into something for others to consume. There is no lesson here. No claim that this is healthier, deeper, or more authentic. It's simply a different arrangement of attention and privacy. Some people feel most alive when they are seen. Others feel most themselves when they are not. This is not a rebellion. It is not a disappearance. It is a decision to let parts of life remain unobserved and to accept the quiet that comes with that choice.